This evening, welcome to SVPMA. And this evening we have a panel presentation around careers in product management, composed of 4 experts in the field. Our first expert this evening is Albert Qian. Help me out.
Albert Chen.
Qian. Oh, I was way off. I apologize.
All good, all good.
And he is founder of Albert's List, which is a fantastic resource for those of you that are looking from a job perspective. And he will be helping to moderate this evening's panel. But I thought we would start off with a few remarks as an expert in the job market, especially in Silicon Valley. If you could fill us in, what are you seeing in the marketplace? And tell us a little bit about yourself and then what you're seeing in the marketplace.
Yeah, so hi everyone. It's good to be here. Thank you, SVPMA, for having me. I'm Albert, founder of Albert's List, and also a product marketer by day at SAS Institute in the AI and analytics space. And so, I mean, I was just thinking a little bit about this year so far, and now that we're almost towards the end of it, just how much of a roller coaster it's been, right? We've seen layoffs, and then we thought layoffs stopped for a little bit, and this week they started back up with companies like Nextdoor, Square, Splunk, and so forth, laying off more people. And so this is definitely shaping up in what I'm hearing from a lot of people to be the toughest job market since at least like the dot-com bust. And so it's hard out there. If you're struggling, you're definitely not alone. And the glimmer of hope that I keep hearing from people is that it's going to get better by next spring. And so my caveat to saying all of that is, and I was saying this in my breakout room before the breakout room ended, is that as long as interest rates remain high, there's, I think, a little less of an appetite to want to invest into innovation like we've seen in the past. So, if you're looking at companies that are creating something, but it's not core to what they initially created and are really good at, then it may not be the kind of place to go right now. A lot of companies are just kind of hoping to create what they have or go with their special sauce and win with that. And so I think that's what we're seeing with a lot of like layoffs right now is a lot of companies are trimming around the edges for things that they may or may not be so certain of as things go forth. And so yeah, right now it's one of those markets where you hope to apply to a lot of places, hopefully get some referrals, which is, I think, really, really key right now. And what I'm seeing from a lot of people that are hoping to get into any company, and then kind of just do your best in the interview process and hope you get somewhere. And so, yeah.
Very good. Thanks, Albert. Yeah, and so just a note to the audience: if you've got questions that are triggered as we're going through the intros, or somebody says something that they're an expert in that you have a burning question, keep those in mind and jot those down, and we'll be interactive and take those as we go. So good to scribble some notes as you go. Our next panelist is Laura Labine. She has 20 years of progressive experience in recruiting. She has expanded into more generalized IT recruiting for other industries across a wide range of industries, always involving product management at various levels. And in 2013, founded Labine and Associates, and has also joined a global recruiting cooperative, NPA Worldwide, which is a 60-plus-year-old global network of highly specialized recruiters. In 10 years, she has placed more than 600 people into jobs. And with that, Laura, would you like to introduce yourself and just maybe a few words on what you're seeing going on in the job market for currently through 2024?
Tom, thank you for that introduction, and thank you, SVPMA, for inviting me to participate in the panel this evening. Yeah, Laura Labine, rhymes with Queen. I think I was always designed for a career in recruiting because I have a didactic memory and an ability to remember people's names and their resumes. It's a little bit creepy, but really useful. And of the people that I mentor, quite a few of them are product folks actually, because there's some very important aspects to career development that have come down to candidate branding and helping to broadcast uh, your special skills, make it easy to be found, and especially in this really weird era in Silicon Valley. In the 20 years that I've been recruiting, this is definitely one of those windows or gaps where things change, kind of like the .com period as well. But it definitely is related to the money in the country. When those interest rates started to go up, a lot of the startups that I was actively working on leadership positions for, they just paused all hiring, and we watched this hiring freeze going on, here in the Silicon Valley. We watched the Silicon Valley Bank and First Republic also as a consequence of the financial economics of our country also go through some changes. So it it's definitely in flux and evolving. But the good news, like canary here, that's or the light at the other end of the tunnel. The good news is that business is becoming more mature and more ready for everybody to go back to work. There's been a evolution of the way companies are engaging with people as well. I've been part of these executive conversations with my clients and my peers, and they're not going to hire. They're just making some real specific decisions about how they invest in talent, whether they are on site or remote, or what kind of benefits they provide to them. There's less people alive. There's less talent to choose from. Let's not forget that millions of people did die from, during the pandemic and such. So that changes what's available out there. And I think it's a healthy thing for us all to evolve. But it's definitely a different job market than it was 5 years ago, right? And so a lot of that is becoming the expert in what you do, creating content to share with others. I saw in one of these posts in the chat about creating video content, and I have to say that that's definitely makes it easier not only to be found by the decision makers, but to make it easy for everybody to already have a soft intro to what it is that you do, what it is that you built and created as well. The future looks good for product managers. There's more and more need for new innovation, and who else to put that together than product managers? And it feels like the predominant characteristics that all of these executives are looking for are not so much of the techno-functional aspects of product management, but the characteristics of empathy and humility. And those are the highest value. And if you've got good empathy skills and humility and some good troubleshooting abilities, you can write your own story. There you go.
Thank you, Laura. That was insightful. Next up, we have Rita Scroggin. She's been an executive search partner since 2010, has partnered with leading Silicon Valley venture capitalists, founders, members of the C-suite on critical searches ranging from director to board level. So for those of you that are looking to get some insight at more senior roles, she would have a unique insight to that. Her clients are fundamentally changing the world, focused on innovation, ranging from Fortune 500 to early stage and stealth startups. Rita has hosted several leadership events discussing topics like how to join a company board, managing board expectations, attracting talent with equity, startup acquisition, CEO roundtable, among others. Recognizing the need to create more diversity in the boardroom of our clients, She founded firstboard.io in 2020, which is a curated collective of diverse female founders, CXOs, and VP level operating leaders in technology and health tech across multiple verticals. Disciplines working together to increase female representation on company boards. Rita began her career at Philips, a great technology company in Hamburg, Germany, holds a BA degree in business management from the University of Hamburg, Applied Sciences, and completed the MBA coursework at Henley Business School in the UK. And Rita, if you'd like to introduce yourself to the group and say a few words.
Yeah. Tom, thank you very much for this very kind introduction. Thank you for having me here and for everybody who's joining us today. Tom, you said it really well. I actually, before I got into executive recruiting, I actually started recruiting in 97. So I've seen all these cycles. I've seen, the dot-com bust. I've seen 2008, how that went down. And now I'm seeing this market. And I think Albert made a really good point. There were definitely a lot of layoffs earlier in the year. Then it seemed to have tapered off a little bit. But yeah, just this week, the news are coming out that there's some, big layoffs and companies shutting down, right? WeWork declared bankruptcy. Zoe's Living is closing down and a few other ones. So we definitely have some shifting dynamics here. But what I will say is that there are also a lot of companies who are getting money, right? So I think it's not all doom and gloom. And I think the majority of the opportunities right now are at early stage companies. And Tom, you mentioned that earlier, to really look at, who's getting funding, because these early stage companies, they are growing, but they're probably not going to be hiring, hundreds of people because they're more cautious now, but they might need, one or two product managers or product leader. So I would really kind of put my emphasis on that versus trying to get, be one of many at the large companies who are all trimming, in one way or another. So that would be my sort of general observation about the market opportunities where they are. A lot of people have moved all over the country. So I don't know if everybody who's on the call or in the meeting today is in Silicon Valley. And I think we're also seeing that companies are calling people back in the office, even if it's just 1 or 2 days a week. So indicating that you're able to get to the office as needed is also, I think, an important aspect, because some companies are really looking for that again. And of course, if people move to Idaho or somewhere, they're going to have a hard time being able to do that. But I think it's also a lot about positioning, right? So in a way, if you are in the market for something, you are the product, and you kind of your own CMO. So how do you really position yourself in a way that you can be found? And Laura touched upon that. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper in that. And I think it is always important to kind of build a network. I think it's more important now and will be increasingly important. So I think, Tom mentioned earlier that there's, some speaking opportunities. I think that's really, really critical. Every time, somebody has a chance to speak somewhere and be visible, I think it's a great opportunity. It also provides content, for a LinkedIn profile. The LinkedIn profile is, I think, probably the most important, face to the outside world anyone, can have. It starts with a professional photo. I still am surprised sometimes how I see these sort of really fuzzy photos, or it's a vacation photo, and it seems so simple, but, I would definitely recommend, look at your photo, make sure it's a professional headshot in some way. And what I sometimes look at is also, is this person connected, right? If I see somebody who has like 300 or 400 LinkedIn connections, I might rule that person out just because of that. You don't have to have 10,000, but I do think, showing that you're somehow networked in that's one way for, for somebody from the outside to see it, is to have, a substantial network on LinkedIn. And, and it might be, 1,000, 2,000 people or more, but it should be more than 500, in my opinion. What else? Keywords to be found. So I used to post roles on LinkedIn. I don't do that anymore, because when I do, I get so many people who apply and who reach out to me, and almost never is there really a good fit. So when I do a search, I go out actively and find somebody based upon the search criteria. So the key is, of course, for me to find, people. And so if you think about the keywords, so if you were on the other end, if you were somebody like me or Laura or Shari, what would you be searching for? So of course, product management, right? But there might be certain, maybe you have experience with robotics, maybe you have experience with SaaS or whatever it is. Think about it, how would somebody find you? And then I would also recommend, when you get an outreach from a recruiter, even though if it's not interesting or you don't think that's going to be a good fit, I think responding to it is definitely something I would recommend, just to make the connection, right? And you want to probably in this market connect with a lot of recruiters, inside companies and also people from the outside, like me and Laura, because you never know where your next opportunity come from. So I'm sure we're going to go into more detail, and I'd be happy to answer more specific questions or share my perspective. But that's my overall, sort of, state of the union, if you will. So I do think that, there are opportunities right now, but they might be a bit more hidden. And I think, there are also new companies being formed right now. And we mentioned AI and new areas we haven't even thought about. So, and the good thing about that is, if the area is new, nobody else has experience in that area. So I'll give you one example. My stepdaughter is a privacy attorney, and she graduated from law school right when GDPR became a topic, but nobody had really experience in it. So early on, in her career, she focused on privacy law. She got experience, and now she's really kind of a thought leader in that space. And I think we are in a time like that right now, where we're creating whole new fields in with AI, and whole new companies where nobody really has experience. So I think there are opportunities there, and I think it's really about kind of broaden the perspective and look outside the box. Okay, so I'm going to stop right there.
Very good. Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. There's a life cycle to new technologies or new skill sets as they come out. I find that if something is 2 years old or less, then people aren't saying, well, you need 5 years experience in this or something, or I'm not even going to talk to you. Even if it's something that can be learned in a weekend, it's if you were 3 years ago, had some exposure to pickleball, you could probably say I'm an expert in pickleball, because the sport was new enough that nobody had more than a year's worth of experience. I would say 2 years from now, if you were trying to get hired as a coach, they would say, well, how many years have you been playing? And the doors start closing. Even if the person who is hiring you only has a year's of experience, they're likely to they tend to estimate the amount of learning it takes, or the amount of time it takes to come up to speed on things. I once had a position for a technology that I was working for the first company in that market, and had interviewed at a second company. The technology had been out for 5 years, and the person that was doing the hiring was insisting on 6 years of experience. So things can get humorous in that space from time to time. All right, with that, let's move on to our final recruiter here, last but not least, Shari. And she brings 10 plus years experience in technical recruiting. She's worked at various organizations like Omron Robotics, producing robotic automation equipment, CareDx, producing transplantation medical devices, and GlassPoint Solar, which manufactures solar steam generators. So really wide range of technology. During her tenure, Shari's been instrumental in building highly skilled and diverse technical teams as a corporate senior recruiter and an agency staffing specialist. She's hired product managers, senior product managers, and product owners, gaining valuable insight into the product development process. Over the last few years, she's honed effective interview skills and offering career coaching services to help candidates navigate their job searches. So as somebody who's coming from more the corporate side, and you spend a lot of time talking to positions that are opening up, please share with us kind of your view on what's going on lately in Q4 and Q1 of next year.
Hi, Tom. Thank you for having me here. What I did notice in the market, and from research from talking to other executive leaders and what they see going on in the market, we're expected to grow at 0.6% annually by the end of 2024, leading us to 163 million jobs. So they said, or what I had researched and read and what I've been hearing about the market, is that we'll be having some gains that will be actually like in the healthcare and social assistance sector, because people are aging, and those are the jobs that are going to be gained this year. The other thing that I want to take note of is that the job market itself had a lot of layoffs, and they said that those companies that did the layoffs, the Googles, the larger tech companies last year, that they should now be profitable and will be hiring in 2024 Q1 and Q2. So we should be able to see some steady growth. And the other point that I want to make is that for product marketing, for product management, those jobs are always going to be in demand, even if the industry is having trouble, because innovation is always in demand. So they are always going to want this industry, and you should be able to pivot if you need to find another job. So if there's anything that within the job process, the networking, we'll talk about the LinkedIn and optimizing your LinkedIn so that way you can be discovered. And interviewing, I'd love to be able to continue talking about that in this session. Thank you.
Very good, thanks. With that, I think we will hand off to Albert, who will do some moderation for the rest of the panel. Albert, if I see, I'll ping you as I see questions coming up. Liz and I will try and keep an eye on the chat window. So if folks have specific questions, please put those into the chat window, and we'll try and take those up as we go around.
Yeah,
Albert,
absolutely.
take it away. We're good. We hope to be interactive here. So.
Yeah, so I wanted to start off with, I think, a couple of questions that'll probably be interesting for everyone here who is looking for a job. And since that seems like a vast majority, I wanted to start with my first question, which is, we're now out of the Great Resignation. Now everybody's staying at their jobs. I heard something on the news the other day that's now what's frustrating managers, that everybody's staying and nobody's quitting anymore, which is weird because everybody hated when people were quitting. And so what hiring managers look for in good times is always different from what they look for in bad times. So for all three of you, what do you see that hiring managers are looking for now, and how does a prospective product manager stand out? And we'll start with Laura, just going from left to right here.
Thank you, Albert. I was going to say, people that you're right, the Great Resignation is long since gone, but what that's translated into is that less of a threshold for risk. So this summer, we've been able to get lots of job offers for candidates, but much lower percentage of acceptance rate. Because, if you've got a good job, the risk of going to a startup and not the unknown, that's definitely an influencer on the market as well. But what do hiring managers look for? Well, the ability to make good decisions and take initiative, right? The ability to, like I mentioned earlier, the characteristics of humility and empathy. One of my associate professional peers, I should say, she's the head of a product. When she's teaching, she also teaches classes in product management, and there's a test that she kind of gives everyone. What happens if your lead engineer calls in sick and you have a release that's due tomorrow? What's the first thing you do? And she's always surprised that nobody says, I would call them to see if they're okay.
Mm.
So, um, so that's obviously not always, the part of the fact that we're all people. Sometimes we forget that, but it is the most important thing that characteristic of being able to realize that everybody is at a different place and you want to meet them where they are. Because product management is a lot about gaining consensus as well as managing the process with multiple stakeholders that all have different paradigms, right? And so those soft characteristics are really important. So in addition to understanding how to use a lot of different tools or being the expert of your domain, which is also very important, hiring managers want to know that if you're going to come in and run a product development on any level, that you understand the business.
Mhm.
And so personal development, I know a lot of people have been doing their own self-studies in the world of AI, which is really important because that's where a lot of the work is going to be, whether it's AI in medical diagnostics or AI in your financial applications. You can, right now at this point, I think, jumpstart your career kind of into a new direction where you might not have the subject matter expertise if you have the other professional expertise as well. So specialization, but also those characteristics of humility and empathy and decision making.
Those are really important. And I think the thing I think about that is you can demonstrate, I think, domain knowledge, you can demonstrate your knowledge of tools. I think being able to convince somebody that you have humility and empathy or that you're a good decision maker in an interview is always really difficult. And so is that something that maybe you see a product manager as something that they can be born with, or then can that be taught?
Sorry, I hear all of that. I have a little out here in my microphone, but I think that the questions in an interview that are when you're asking situational questions, how would you behave if this happened, or how have you dealt with the challenge in the past? How an indicator of how someone's going to behave in the future can be deduced from how they've handled situations in the past. Whether or not somebody has humility and empathy, we can tell right away if you're throwing somebody else under the bus that those two characteristics might not be on your list.
Yeah. Rita, what are you seeing that hiring managers that you work with are looking for, and how are they looking for folks who stand out and such?
Yeah, Albert, that's a really good question. I don't think there's necessarily a 12-step program because I think every person is different, right? And sorry, one quick second. My dog is kind of scratching here, so hopefully it won't be too loud. Play it for him. Anyway, so I think hiring is always very, very subjective. So it depends on who's on the other end, right? But I think in general, I think a lot of people are looking for people who are collaborative, and in product management in particular, people who can build consensus, right? Because that's a key characteristic for being a product management individual contributor or leader. So I think they're probably trying to gauge that. I think in product management, domain expertise is important, or domain expertise in an adjacent space to kind of, so if there's maybe it's a new field, but what's related to it? If you're thinking about, okay, so AI, I'm thinking about, Rita.com. They just raised a ton of money, and they're basically helping people write content, whether it's a press release or whatever. So, let's say you were to interviews there, what space, what domain is related. It's kind of what they're doing is kind of new, but there are adjacent spaces which kind of created this new idea. Because there are other areas where domain expertise may not be that relevant, but I think for product management it always is. In my opinion, at least. And these searches tend to be more linear, right? Versus, a CMO can transition between different domains easier, or a VP of engineering, can transition between multiple different domains. So yeah, so I think there isn't really this one thing, but I think, being able to kind of share or demonstrate, which is not easy to do, that, you can work with other people, you can build consensus, and you're not going to be disruptive. What I hear a lot from VCs when we talk about board roles, which is, it's a different skill set, but, there's sort of a general fear to bring on a board member who is disruptive, which in a board role you might actually want, right? Because you want a different perspective. But there's always this sort of famous cultural fit. So who is a cultural fit and who determines the cultural fit? These things are, a bit fuzzy, but, so I think that it's the personality, it's the domain expertise, and it's, how this person kind of brings it all together. So I don't know if it's helpful or not, but that's kind of what I've been seeing.
Yeah, no, I've always seen the product manager and even the product marketer where I am as sort of the hub, the person in the middle who is really directing and quarterbacking the product that they own, either from a product management or product marketing perspective. And so I see it every day in my job. The ability to build consensus is incredibly important. The ability to drive and manage your projects, incredibly important. You're almost, as I've always heard, the mini CEO of whatever it is that you own. And so that's a really, really great answer, in my opinion.
Yeah, Albert, I think it's very true. I think the product manager is in a way a mini CEO who has to manage by building influence, right? Or influencing people. So whether it's an individual contributor or even at a VP level, that remains the same. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Shari, what are you seeing in your experiences with what hiring managers are looking for?
So for the job market, I just want to say that I don't think it's a collapse.
What are you saying?
Low,
Experiences.
but I'm seeing a lot of hiring people that they might not have posted the job at all, or hiring people that have been referred in. So I'm definitely seeing those things. But what I do notice and think that are the most important skills that you want to put out there when you're looking for a job in product management, you want to talk about your strategy and your life cycle. You want to either put that on first your resume, LinkedIn, and then in an interview. You want to talk about your data analytics, how you came about getting them, what surveys you used, your customers, and start thinking about your story of what you've done previously in your positions and where you shine, the areas that you'd be able to bring to this company. Your cross-functional collaboration, as mentioned, your positions deal with many different areas. Engineering, you deal with stakeholders, you deal with UX UI design, how your communication skills are, competitive analysis, marketing, all of the data that you've compiled, your agile or Scrum methodologies and the frameworks around that. Those are definitely areas that in an interview, the skills and competencies need to come across, but people hire people that they like, and people hire people that they need to fit into the team. So sometimes, it's someone, if you think of it like a superhero, maybe a Batman and Robin. Batman has one skill, but Robin comes in and fills the other. So if you have whatever expertise they're looking for, then you could fill that need. And sometimes it comes down to how well you'll perform in it, how good your presentation was in the interview. Did they have you come in and, solve a problem that you weren't aware of? And maybe you have to explain how you did that and through reasoning and through your thought process, and ask questions that the interviewer is very interested in about the product, or give them a scope of understanding what they're asking you to do in the interview when they throw a question at you, being able to understand how you would add value to their product. Because a lot of people will ask you to come in and even though they know you don't know their product, they want you to have a shot at telling how you think and what you would do to add to their product in the next year, or why you think it would or wouldn't be successful. So those are some of the things that I think will help you when looking in the job market, is selling those skills that you have. And I think that if you understand who you are in your story, it's easy to tell it. And if you go through a process where you take your time and answer the interviewer, you'll be able to critically break down your steps so that they can see your thinking. And that's how you're checking off their list. Yes, 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 they do this, they do that. They saw something new for me. They brought something to my attention I didn't think of. So I think those things will help.
And Shari, you brought up a really important thing that I think I wanted you to dive a little deeper into. And so you mentioned that you're seeing a lot of people getting hired right now because they were referred in, or it was a hidden job market. And I know we could talk about this particular thing for like another hour and a half, but really quickly, for those who may be struggling in right now, right, sending out tons and tons and tons of applications and not hearing back, how do they get in touch and get that referral, or use the resources out there like LinkedIn, etc., to vie for attention and get that interview in what is such a noisy market right now?
I'm glad you actually asked that question, because I wanted to talk about branding yourself. So you can use LinkedIn. We'll talk about that first. In LinkedIn, you can inbox someone. They usually say, like, rule of thumb, you want to connect with someone because they have something in common with you, maybe a same school that you went to, maybe a place that you're from, maybe a connection that you know, maybe an industry that you're both in. So when you connect with someone, you don't always want to ask someone for something first. You kind of want to build a little bit of a conversation, maybe a few times, and then talk about what it is that you think that they could help you with. But always you should offer to help someone else back, because that's just good etiquette. Even as a recruiter, when I'm on LinkedIn, I got so many inboxes of just people hitting me up. But what stands apart is when someone else, maybe says that they can do something for you, even if you don't need it. It brings a good feeling. So when you inbox people, you have to keep it short and quick, and maybe find a reason that you connect. And then when you want to talk to them about a position or a job, look at their background and why did you select them? I selected you because I see you have XYZ skills. This is something I'd like to do in my career path. I'm hoping that I can follow a similar career path. Do you have any advice on how to apply for these, or what conference you belong to? Sometimes just asking about the industry, or offering up something that you know about the industry. Oh, I've realized that this software works well, or I see your company does that. We do this similarly. Here's an article I wrote. So then that leads into branding. If you can brand yourself, either by, maybe you're a professional who could add to LinkedIn with something that you're writing about, or a blog that's out there for your industry, or talking at different conferences. Then you're starting to build a brand for yourself. And if you start building a brand for yourself, then people will be coming to you. In any of the groups that you're a part of, you have tons of connections in there. If you speak once at any of those groups, like today, you could have hundreds or thousands of people knowing about you. That makes connections and following easy. On LinkedIn, you don't have to connect. You can now change it to follow. It's one of the features. So maybe you have more people following you that way. And that's one way to, build more opportunities to connect with people. And also, if you help people out, they eventually will help you out. I hope that answered the question.
Oh, definitely. And Jen in the questions here was saying, what if you don't have much to give back? My answer is that I think that if you're paying attention within your industry or what you want to do, there is always something to give back, even if it's an opinion that others share, that at least it shows that you are out there and reading the literature to understand what's going on.
I've worked with the new college grads with a little bit of career coaching, and some of them have inboxed people in their industry and just asking, you have X, Y, and Z skills. I'd like to learn from someone like you. I saw that you did X, and I'm hoping to do that. I did this in my undergrad. And just then people like to help people, right? If you're not just going, hey, this is your job at your company, can you put my resume in for me? Then they're just gonna be like, I don't know you, like I can't represent.
Yeah.
So, there's a way to talk to people and get to know them in a genuine way. And when you come
Yeah.
up genuine, people want to help. If anyone inboxes me, and I mean, if I don't have 1,000 messages and I can say, well, you have XYZ, or you're missing this or that, or that's, why, I don't think they would move forward with you. I've been honest with some candidates like that, just so, you could say a kind word and then people appreciate it. They're like, oh, thank you for even responding sometimes. So, but sometimes you have to inbox a few people. It's a sales job. You're selling.
It is.
Sales.
It's a contact sport, as I like to call it, So, yeah.
You're your best marketer.
Oh, yeah. You have to advocate for yourself because the squeaky wheel is the one that gets the grease in this country, at least in the United States. So actually that you mentioned something about new grads, and I wanted to open this up to both Rita and Laura as well. If you're a new grad or somebody entry level with less than 3 years of experience, love to see some hand raises here because I think I saw a lot of folks with a lot more experience. But I also want to address the new graduate and transitioners and entry level folks, because that's also something that's near and dear to me running Albert's List over the last 10 years, is that there's a tremendous gap between what they teach you in school and what the real world expects of you. And you have to really make up a lot of that, I guess what you could call, to borrow from the industry, educational debt versus technical debt, that you have to really learn how to find a job and maintain that job and build your brand and so forth. And so for Laura, Rita, Shari, or all three of you, what is your advice to entry-level employees, entry-level product managers, people who want to be APMs, especially in this really tough market right now where experience is being valued way more than, say, somebody who a company is willing to take a risk on that they'd be much more willing to do during the Great Resignation?
If I can keep going, is that okay?
Sure. Yeah. I want to hear from Rita and Laura too, though.
I was just going to say,
if they have an opinion to share.
The easiest thing to do for a new grad then is to either use your resume and explain what you've done in a previous project, or do volunteer work. So take something from school and use your transferable skills. If you wanted to become a project manager and you had, worked as a director within a group or a job on campus, use those skills to transfer in.
Awesome. Rita, any thoughts? I think you work more with executives, but do you also work with entry-level?
No, I don't work with entry-level individuals, but I have some thoughts on it. So I don't have necessarily direct experience there. But I think, what's relevant to entry-level people is also relevant to everybody else. And that is really the buyer persona, right? Which is kind of a product management exercise. So if you think about it, who is going to hire an entry-level person or an experienced person? An entry-level person might be, the buyer persona might be the director of product management, or maybe even a senior product manager. To some degree, maybe even the VP of product. So what one could do is say, okay, I'm going to go on LinkedIn and I'm going to look at, let's say I'm in San Francisco region somewhere, who are people who could be hiring me? And it's probably a pretty long list. And then of course this question of the outreach. So like, I think, Shari suggested reaching out to people, and it might be saying, hey, look, I'm a new grad, I'm looking for an opportunity, in product management, and here's why. Although when you send a LinkedIn request, you can't really say that much. You only have a few sentences you can say there. So you have to find kind of maybe an angle, why would somebody connect? Good thing is to ask for advice. A lot of people like to help people and give advice, and might even be willing, somebody might be reaching out to to somebody who could be a hiring manager and say, hey, can you give me like 5 minutes and get your advice, right? And the point is to build a connection. And then that person might get to know that new grad, say, hey, I really like you, so I'm going to keep my eyes and ears open, and when a position opens up in our company, you're going to be on my mind. I think that's going to be more effective than sending out lots of resumes and applications who disappear in some sort of applicant tracking system and probably will never be seen again. I mean, you should do that too. So it's not like there's one way, the right way and the wrong way. All of these things can work together. But if I were in that position, I would do that. In a sense, when I'm looking for new clients, it's kind of what I'm doing, right? So when I'm looking for new clients, I'm thinking about, okay, so who's my buyer persona? And I'm trying to find a connection with them, because sometimes, there might be a role, and oftentimes an executive role is not posted. So it's kind of in a way very, very similar to uncover, those hidden opportunities which are not necessarily apparent. And, for product manager, I think it's a great exercise in, defining the buyer persona.
Yeah. Yeah. Always a very, very foundational product management piece.
Yeah, I know. I mean, one more thing on this. I know somebody who decided that she wanted to be on company boards. And this was at the beginning of the pandemic. And she essentially called herself in her first board role. Now she's on 3 or 4 boards, some of them public, some of them private. It's at a different level, but the principle, I think, applies to any kind of level.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Oh, that's great. And leaping off from that too, I want to just kind of the thread that both of you are saying in building networks, and I call it seeding. You're seeding your future, coworkers, right? You're building when reaching out to people on LinkedIn to expand your network. It doesn't always have to be the person at the job. It could be somebody else. So down the line, reaching out to someone today could be your boss in 5 years, right? So connecting with people that have big networks like recruiters is always a good idea. And sending those requests without to request to connect without trying to ask them for a job, you have to be patient sometimes, and knowing that those connections will be able to watch you and see you and follow you, and they'll be easier to find you when they're looking for you. So connect with a lot of people, even if you don't think they're the people you need to connect with today. And the second thing is to say yes. Say yes. If you're starting your career right now, especially in an economy like this, don't overthink things. I've been helping coach some small businesses on how to grow, specifically with their hiring processes. So I've been speaking to a lot of entry level or career restarters, and it's surprising how many people get in their own way of what they think the job is and what they think they want to do. You don't know until you've done it. If you're new in your career, you need to get some experience. So doing things that you enjoy doing, no matter what, it's work. But if you find an industry that resonates for you, that's a good direction to be in. There's a lot of support work right now, whether it be coordinators or administrators or analysts. And those are all great opportunities to get your foot in the door, and then let your skills shine, right? Ask, what else can I do? What else can I do? What else can I do? So don't have to be specifically looking for a job description for a product manager or such, but any of those opportunities to get into an organization. You never really know what's going to happen once you get started, because it's a living, breathing organism, a business is, right? So once you join an organization and a team, anything can happen. So my advice is also to say yes. And yes, people do love to help. I think that recruiters in general are some of the most helpful people, or at least ask them, they'll tell you.
No, I mean, look, there's a lot of recruiters that shouldn't be recruiters, and then there are the 3 of you who are great recruiters, because you're spending your Wednesday night on a Zoom with 58 other people. imparting wisdom and advice when you could be doing many, many other things, right? And so,
And also just asking, what do you think of my resume? Does my resume match up for this job or not? Recruiters, I think, are probably the most common to respond to that. That's a good thing to ask a recruiter. What do you think of my resume?
definitely, definitely. So we're getting some questions from audience members, and I think we can I think we'll go back to the right. Easy to just go from right to left and vice versa. So Deepika asks, how would someone who is looking for a job in a new geography, say they moved from the United Kingdom to the United States, be considered in the current job market? And I know, like, I think I have noticed that there are a couple of folks who aren't even in the United States. And I mean, part of me wants folks. I always like encouraging folks to put their locations in the chat too, just to see how global we are. But what are your thoughts about relocation for a job during this time and how you get noticed? Laura, I'll start with you.
Thank you. Well, Rita had mentioned too about geography and moving. There is something to be said about being close to where the action is, but there's also this phenomenon going on where businesses realize they can function in a distributed environment. So either they can or they can't, right? Those are the two different scenario, or maybe they're somewhere in the middle, right? They have some people that are remote and some people not, but my business is 100% virtual. Of all of my 18 members, none of them are in the Silicon Valley except for me. I think that for when I'm working with startups that are hiring and building their product teams, they tend to focus more on what time zone is the team in, because they tend to work more in sync on the same time zone versus a 5-hour difference. I've got two guys that are on my team and they're in India and they're working US hours, and so there's really very little question about overlap there. But I've got another team member who's in Saipan, and those hours don't overlap very much at all. So I can understand how complicated it can be for a team of a bunch of engineers all working together. It helps that there's overlap in their day, so that they're doing sessions together, whether it be Scrum sessions or planning sessions or UX interviews. But that's where the location is becoming more relevant. And then also startups that are very stealth and top secret, where they would just want everybody in the same room. That's also important, right? So I grew up in the prairie, which is like being on an island. And it would be very hard to imagine being an executive recruiter if I were still in the prairie, right? The ecosystem is very, very different. I don't think you necessarily need to be in an urban area, but you want to be in a proximity to where the work is, right?
You do, yeah. I mean, like, I'm out here in the Bay Area, and a lot of the team that I work with at my company is located around the country and even out in Europe. And I was the one last night hanging out at the Commonwealth Club in San Francisco listening to Sam Altman speak. So, it's one of those things where you just have to like be where the action is, and that really makes a lot of sense. Rita, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I do think it helps to be living in an area, in an urban area where there are opportunities to meet other people, right? So of course, Silicon Valley, San Francisco, we're dominated by tech. Life science is another area. So I think it's important to kind of, number one, be able to kind of go out, network, meet people, and it's kind of hard to do from Boise, Idaho. So I would encourage people to really think about that. If they're relocating, to move somewhere where there's sort of a major hub. It might be Chicago or New York or Seattle, whichever area it is. But I think, if I were to move, I would think about, okay, so where are the opportunities? A lot of people, there was a time when everybody moved to Portland, Oregon, and you probably all heard the joke, right? It's where young people go to retire. So even though it might be a great area, and I personally love it, but for a career, probably not the best place, right? There might be other places like it. So I think that's what I would think about if geographic region is a consideration. And I think the time zone aspect is also important. Sometimes, and I hear that too, that I might do a search and we're saying, okay, we want somebody who is in the Pacific time zone or one time zone adjacent to it or on the East Coast, because it makes it easier for collaboration. So that, instead of saying, hey, we need this person to be in the office, we want this person to be in the same time zone, but we also might want this person to be within fairly easy travel distance. So for example, if somebody's maybe living in Seattle, the company's headquartered here in the Bay Area, every once in a while there might be a quarterly meeting, and it won't take that much to fly that person down here. So up and down the West Coast or the East Coast and anywhere in between. But I think geographic focus is important.
Yeah, definitely. And Shari.
I want to touch on what Rita said. Nearshoring, I think, is what most companies prefer to do. Hire someone in the US from Canada, Mexico, someone in the same time zone. I think if you're looking in the UK and you want to come here, then if there's teams that are already developed and maybe just the manager has to be in the same time zone, they might consider it. But I think nearshoring is the way to go. So that way, in this environment is what I'm seeing. I do see when I've done a little bit of research that in 2025, they think the market's going to change where it could be more of a candidate market, not like it was in 2021, but it will get better. And at that point, more people will be doing remote. Right now, companies don't have to do remote. They don't have to cater to candidates because there's plenty of candidates for them. But when that pool dries up, then you might see people being more flexible, more remote jobs. And at that point, you'd be able to have a better shot at working for a company that wasn't close by in another country, because they'll be looking for talent. So it'll become broader like it was a few years ago. And then on your LinkedIn, just make sure that, you have your settings, because LinkedIn is where everybody looks for talent. Make sure that your settings are set up so that you can be discovered. And if you have a niche position or a company has a niche position where they need someone with high skills, then at that point, if you have the skills that are really desired, you might have a shot as well at working at a company that might not take you right now in this current economy.
Awesome. Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I love that we might get to see some version, maybe a subdued version of the Great Resignation again in 2025. I think that, one thing that I've told folks on Albert's List after all these layoffs at the FANG companies and so forth is, these things turn back around. And when they turn back around, you get to remember what happened the first time around. Like, one example I give is Salesforce, right? They laid off 10,000 people earlier this year. And Mark Benioff was on record laughing at one of his meetings about it because he was jokingly pretending not to know what happened. And then lo and behold, 7-8 months later, they're hiring for 3,500 people. And so if you're an employee and they're trying to beg you to be a boomerang employee and you know what Mark Benioff did, well, you can always choose to go somewhere else because maybe you think you'd be treated better over there. And so I hope that for everyone, they remember what's gone on over these last couple of months, because some of it's been pretty brutal too. I read a story last week of how Google laid off 20 data scientists from the Google Assistant team. And among those laid off included somebody who was on maternity leave and somebody who was battling cancer. And so I just think about that, and it's just like, really? We really don't have that much empathy anymore in some of these companies when it comes to business. So those are just things to remember.
And then there's Twitter.
What's that?
And then there's Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's quite a place to be right now. We had another question. Yes, go ahead.
One comment on the Twitter comment. I know, they employ the woman who slept in the sleeping bag in the Twitter office. She's famous now, right? I think everybody invites her in some form or another. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, what happened at Twitter last year around this time was crazy too. And I mean, I think that really set, I would say, set the tone for a little while for how these layoffs happened, with people waking up in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. locked out of Slack and no other message other than they were pretty much gone based on what they saw in their personal email. And so maybe we can return to a more personal approach to it. So, I guess it's a we'll see. Oh, go ahead.
Good point, Albert. I wanted to say about when people start interviewing, they definitely should ask the company, what is their funding? Are they profitable? When was your last layoff? Do you intend on having layoffs? You should be putting that company under a microscope to make sure that you're not going somewhere
Yes.
that's stable.
Yes.
Because we don't want to have people in the same situations that you're talking about, because it's
Yeah, because I've seen recruiters who mention how they were laid off like twice in a matter of like 8 months. That's a lot of whiplash that no one deserves, no matter what you do for a living. So yeah, you're interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing you. Tom, how are we doing on time?
We're doing good. We usually so we've completed an hour.
Okay.
Usually we take questions and whatnot up till say 8:30.
Okay. Okay.
That should allow us to touch on a number of things.
I wanted to ask another one of our attendee questions here, and then I wanted to go into one of the questions I typed up myself. But hopefully there are other questions in between here from folks that, yeah, good questions, Jen. So another question from the audience. For someone moving job roles, their example is much of their prior experience was in investment banking and they moved to product later on. How easy or difficult is this move now, I suppose? I would say my initial answer on that is that's really hard now. And I think one of the easy ways to look at that is boot camp software engineers are having the hardest time they've ever had ever, because a lot of companies have been laying those types of professionals off and opting for more experienced folks. I would say in other industries like marketing, probably similar difficulty, if not a little less, just because when you can choose between the experienced person and the person who might have the skills but not the domain, you generally pick the person with the skills and the domain. So I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts on how easy it is to move around right now from one area to another, and we'll start back with you, Shari.
I think that, as you were saying, that if somebody has, it's a competitive market. If somebody else has the same skills as you, but in the industry or everything that they're asking for, transitioning would be much harder unless you were looking to take a position down a level or in a startup or of someone small, like a boutique company just starting out, or somebody who could use your skills as a gig worker. Well, because there's a lot of people working gig jobs and they're able to get them on sites like Upwork or Fiverr, maybe a part-time job to get you going in those skills. And then when the economy opens up, maybe you could be more competitive then.
Yeah. Rita?
Yeah, that's probably not going to be very easy right now. I mean, somebody coming out of finance, I mean, the obvious space would be fintech, where that might be a little bit easier and related. But I probably would say, right now the focus may be more on, where somebody is most marketable, which is, when they have the experience in finance to stay there, and maybe try the transition when things are opening up, hopefully, soon. I mean, the one thing is also, which I think is on everybody's side, is the demographics, right? I mean, a lot of people are getting to the age where they might be retiring, whether or not they want to or not. Sometimes people, as you get older, people get, ill and retire maybe sooner than they thought. they would retire. So I do think there is sort of still this idea that we're going to have a labor shortage sooner or later, right? The question, of course, is when and how, how significant will it be? But yeah, I mean, it's probably not going to be an easy transition right now. But, if maybe there's somebody in the network who can help, or, again, I would look at fintechs or something which is really, really closely related to finance.
Definitely. And Laura.
I would say that this is the time to do a restart. This is the time in your history when the economy and the world of work is changing and evolving. And I mean, I used to be a musician.
Ooh, I love it.
And then I was an executive assistant. And then I stumbled into this work, which is the most natural thing for me to do. But it was through a series of different well, I mean, the choices were made for me, right? Like Napster killed the music business. So
Yeah.
and so, I think that again, having humility, oftentimes when you're doing a career restart, compensation may be one of the biggest reasons why people might stay in a career if they've got to keep that level of salary and stuff to support themselves and their family. But if there's some opportunity to kind of do what I call a lily pad, like taking a role that's not the perfect compensation, but it's got really good experience and an opportunity to level up. Like, it's when the economy is going cuckoo, that is the good opportunity to make that decision when maybe it's already been made for you, or you have to look at what's available instead of what you're worth. Just as a temporary, right? As a lily pad to get to where you're needing to go, but really continuing to be authentic and honest with yourself about the work, right? And so taking an opportunity to do something that you haven't done before so you can get that experience. And it's the characteristics and the qualities that are going to translate. So have you come from investment banking, you have a strong domain knowledge of that industry. So pivoting it, a lot of people do this and they don't try to even, or pivoting it into product. Well, so it's the functional aspects about product management, but that you can learn. You can learn those things. You can work through doing some product coordination or even some testing. There's a lot of different functions in the process, right? And you take all of your subject matter expertise, your industry knowledge, and move into it that direction. There's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity in that, right? So having that humility and that willingness to be a novice again and learn, I think that's important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a question that connects directly with that we've gotten from the meeting chat here is, for those of us who do want to reset, or for those of us who do want to, who have been out for a while because of all the layoffs, how do recruiters like you all look at hiring managers view time off in between jobs, either as a sabbatical, a gap year, or just because you've been out for 8 months because literally no one is hiring? Shari, I'll start. Actually, I went the other way, so Laura, you again.
Well, having some, explanation about what you've been doing on that downtime, taking that window of time to invest in yourself, right? Your gap year, traveling or taking some extra classes, or maybe you had to take time off to care for an ailing family member, right? It's okay and it's appropriate to be able to say, took time off for family or traveled. Listen, we know that there's an ebb and flow in the world. I think recruiters are oftentimes more understanding, but we can translate that to hiring managers as well if they ask, if they forget that we're in a pandemic, or if they forget that the economy crashed, right? And it makes you a better employee if you're also feeding your fire during that time, right? I remember the economy after the mortgage crisis of 2008, 2009, and people were getting laid off, taking their packages and such. And a lot of people that took that money and went and traveled for a year, just take into consideration that it takes about 90 days to get in a good economy. It takes about 90 days to get a job, right? And so it doesn't feel like vacation once you've been laid off, but to be cognizant about the process of what it's going to take, because some people have taken that opportunity when it's been presented to them, and it's hard to get your feet back into it. So you know, it's not hard to explain that you had to take a break, and I think it's okay to, you can put sabbatical, you can put out of for family illness, any of those things. If you have some context to share what you learned while you were traveling the world, or maybe you wrote a blog that you had shared with others about your experience, those are gems. Those are great qualities to have. And they also share with your future employer that you're a very rich person, right? That you have a lot of experience that can help inform you in your decision making.
Yeah, like even if you went on a 1 month vacation, right? You can talk about how planning a vacation translates into a product. And you can talk about how if something went wrong on the vacation, how you pivoted and so forth. Kind of make
Legitimately, so many creative entrepreneurs, it's when they're in that blank space,
yeah.
that's when the good stuff comes. Yeah.
I mean, you know what? We're so connected every day. And like, I'll get off a quick soapbox here. It's just that we don't have enough time to think anymore. And we need that time to think. So, someone was just telling me about doing a digital detox today, which I haven't done in a really long time. And so that's something that's really important. Rita, your thoughts on the question? Gap year, so
Yeah,
forth.
I think it's okay to say, hey, I took some time off. Oftentimes, somebody's later in their career, they may have not taken time off for the last 20 years, right, in a significant way. So I think it's okay to say, hey, this was my chance to take some time off and reset, do some travel, whatever, to work on some projects. I don't think it requires a big explanation, but it depends how long, right? I think there's sort of, if it goes over a year, then it's a little bit, then maybe it does require, an explanation. But if it's anywhere between 6 months and, maybe, shy of a year, I don't think there's going to have to be much of an explanation. Of course, it all depends, right? We know there were so many changes, recently with COVID, the economy, everything else. People have been moving, from one place to another. Somebody may, you might want to say, hey, here's what I did, and it was a great experience. And to highlight that, you're ready to come back, right? You're fully refreshed and you're ready to come back, and you can't wait to contribute again. So to make it clear that this was a one-time event and now you're going to be working there forever. No, but yeah.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. Shari, your thoughts?
I think that you should be able to write it in a cover letter, just state what you've been doing. And that explains it, so that at least someone doesn't say a gap and go, okay, they haven't done anything for 3 years, 6 months, whatever it is. Previous to COVID, previous to the down economy, I would still consider someone if they just, said what they were doing, even if it said it on the resume that, they had taken time off or sabbatical. I would definitely still call them, because people do relevant things. Sometimes they're on Coursera learning something. Maybe they're doing, one of those mud runner type competitions and leading a group on the side since they don't have any work that they can do. Or maybe they're doing something on a website, working part-time, like I said, through gig. Whatever they can do and whatever happened, just be honest, be clairvoyant about what happened, what you learned, what you want, and then go for it again. Some people, as far as recruiters, I think we're pretty open. We're just looking for skills. Your skills don't die. They didn't go into a coffin. You're still here. We can resurrect your skills and use them again. And I think that it's very marketable. It's sometimes the managers can be stubborn, some of them, and some of them aren't. And then it depends on, again, the economy, and the competition, and you just find the right fit. You'll love the company that loves you back. Someone says no, they don't know you. That's okay. You keep going. You'll eventually land somewhere and you'll get an opportunity.
And by the way, you just mentioned something that that really perked my ears. You mentioned cover letter. So you know, I've asked this question a lot of times to recruiters on Albert's list. And it seems like the going consensus today is that nobody reads cover letters anymore. And so I want to know, do you or your hiring managers read cover letters, and should people still be writing them? And in what situations should they be doing so?
I personally like a cover letter when I'm going through like LinkedIn or I'm going through the ATS. I first look at the resume. And if I don't know what's going on, but I see skills and I'm uncertain, either because it might be too technical for me, if you fit right, I'll go to your cover letter to help me understand, yes, you are a fit and why you think you are. And that will convince me to move it on because it clarifies it. Because I don't know everything that you do. And there's only one page, you can only fit in so much. So sometimes my manager said he wanted skill X or skill Y or something important, and you can clarify it better in a cover letter. Do the managers read it? I have no idea, but at least I've qualified you that then I can do a phone screen and then get you to the manager. So the cover letter helps me. I like it. Sometimes it's like useless if it's just words.
Yeah.
You know, if it's not pointing out what you did, if it's not telling me an accomplishment that's relevant to the job, you know, it has to have like depth to it, just like your bullet points. They can't, in either a resume or a cover letter, you can't just say, I did this, this was my responsibility. You have to give me an example. You have to tell me this, you know, what you accomplished. It can't be, you know, I answered the phones. It can't be, you know, I did road mapping. Road mapping of what? What did you accomplish? What did you specifically do? So that those things, either in a cover letter or a resume, will then lead me to say, okay, bingo. It's not just word search, keywords that you're putting in. Those are important, but you also have to give me depth behind what you did. You know, show an accomplishment, a percentage, something that helps me understand, you know, how you used it in the job. It wasn't just words that you got on the page to get me to call you. And then I'm like, oh, I don't think you're a fit.
Yeah, that's so true. Rita, any thoughts on cover letters?
I personally don't read them, and I don't think that people I work with read them. But what I will sometimes ask somebody, say, you know, so let's say I have a conversation with a potential candidate, and it seems like it could be a potential fit. What I might ask this person, say, can you share something, you know, which is, you know, in your background, which is really relevant, you know, to the role. So instead of some generic cover letter, more like, okay, you know, I have particular expertise in this area, and here's why this might be relevant. So, you know, I might ask them to say, hey, you know, share a few sentences I can forward to the to my contact at the company, but it's specific to that role and to that company versus just some sort of cover letter. That's my perspective, but you know, there's no right or wrong. You know, yeah.
And how about you, Laura?
So I think the cover letter is the same as the summary, you know, when sending the email with the resume attached. So I don't need an extra document, but I want to echo what Shari said about providing insight. You know, there's definitely a lot of pattern recognition in the mind of a recruiter. In fact, I often joke that we're the original AI. Studied, you know, our whole career is collecting data points to be able to make intuitive decisions. And oftentimes that cover letter is giving that glimpse of the person and how things fall together. I don't know how many hiring managers read them, but the influencers, such as recruiters, we are scanning those for relevant, and that's important. Yeah, we want to know where does the rubber hit the road? How does this work? How do you take all of these things and also who you are as a person, and make those things happen together in the middle of that Venn diagram. Yeah. So instead of cover letters, I think it's more of the intro statement, right? Like your elevator pitch of sorts too. But it needs to just be simple and clean, not the overly confident John McEnroe of I am the best, but really this is my experience and this is how it falls together, and this is what I've done, and I welcome you to an opportunity to discuss further. Yeah.
Awesome. And let's see. Yeah, no, it's funny because I've seen so much poo-pooing about cover letters the last couple years, and I think this is the most friendly crowd of people towards cover letters I've seen in quite a while. I kind of love it. Even though I personally don't like writing cover letters. But I do see that there is a specific use case to it if you were to look at it from a product perspective. I think we're going to do two more questions. I had one more question, and then there's a member of the audience that asked another question. And I think, and this one was, are visas or sponsorships an issue for hiring managers right now, or do you have any tips? Laura.
So are they a situation? Well, getting a new visa is tricky, right? So that still continues to be a challenge. And transferring them is not so much of a crisis, you know. I think with any startup, it comes to a personal decision on how the founders decide to put together the compliance, right? But as a rule of thumb, it's still very hard to find the right people to do certain work. So we still depend upon our international community to augment our workforce. The great thing about companies being more distributed is that it's easier to hire people globally without even having to have them relocate. There's many different global employers of record that are able to bring in employees from different parts of the world that don't require immigration to step in on that. So I think it's still a risk for companies that are not financially strong to make a commitment, and so that's always, when you're interviewing a potential new employer, something that is taken into consideration. And just as another anecdotal point, a lot of hiring, tech hiring, I've seen influx of roles for the industrialized military complex, and those all require people to be citizens for security purposes. So it's been really tricky, as I've been working on a telecommunications role for a private mobile platform, and have a fabulous candidate who doesn't meet the immigration part, and it's heartbreaking. But I think compared to and even 20 years ago, it's evolved. That's definitely a necessity, but it's really hard to get a new visa.
Yeah. Rita, any thoughts on visas?
Yeah, I think the appetite for visas right now is low, right? Even to transfer one. And it also depends, from which country somebody's coming from. So if certain countries, all the visas for that country might have been already exhausted, right? So that's just not possible, even if the company would want to do it. I think in general, large companies are probably more inclined in sponsoring a visa because they have a whole, department.
Capital F, X, capital C.
What's that?
What is this?
I think somebody just forgot to mute their microphone.
Okay. So I think that's not easy right now, for sure, and especially a new visa. It depends on which time of the year. So if it's early in the year when there's still visas available, it might be easier, versus later in the year when there just really aren't any available.
Yeah.
So so and there's a lot of discussion about that, right? And people who have been laid off and who are on H-1B visa, there's not much time. And so they're trying, of course, to get buying time. So that's probably going to change the market dynamics too. I think we're going to lose a fair amount of people who have been on an H-1B visa and they just can't get a new one.
Yeah. And Shari.
I believe that people are still getting visas, but I don't think that there's a lot. And it's pretty much everything that Rita and Laura covered. You know, it depends where you're coming from, depends what skills you're bringing to get approved. And then companies like to hold on to you, especially in a bad economy, with that visa. And then when it becomes a good economy, some people try to get them transferred. So that could happen in the future too, if they're not happy where they're at.
Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah, I mean I think it's opening up the new visa, I think, window for next spring. So, we'll see how that goes as well.
Yeah, for the new,
Um,
definitely.
yeah. So I know we're at 8:30. I wanted to ask one more question, and I don't know if this question would be useful, so I'll pose it out there. Um, I wanted to ask, so when we know we were mentioning industries earlier that would be of interest, and right, product management and product marketing all about domains. And we mentioned that, AI, cloud, DevOps, those are all hot areas right now. Healthcare and social services, we also heard was a hot area. I want to, because I always like throwing in industries or things that people may not necessarily think of that could bring them hope in terms of applying for a job. Are any of you noticing industries that may be flying under the radar that folks should consider as we get into the new year and perhaps they go on a job search? So instead of everybody rushing into healthcare at once or everybody rushing into the next hot AI startup, where's another place that people may be overlooking that they can consider? And I'll go back around again. So, Shari, any thoughts?
Sure. Aviation and aerospace is pretty hot, and they're one of the highest paying. Biotechnology, healthcare companies, and information services and infrastructure companies all pay well. You know, Facebook, of course, paid top notch for employees. Microsoft, Google, LinkedIn, Salesforce, Amazon, all the big companies. Those salaries went, I think, as high as like 233,000 for product managers. That's what I had seen out there.
Wow. Yeah. Rita, any thoughts on your end?
I think cybersecurity, I mean, that's not really hidden, but cybersecurity has a huge talent shortage, right?
Yeah.
And especially, I think the industry is particularly looking for female candidates because there is an underrepresentation there. So I think cybersecurity is a good area to look into because, I mean, the threats keep coming and it's certainly not going to go away. So I think security is a really, really good spot to look at.
Yeah. And Laura.
Well, what I wish would be hiring is job reskilling and job training programs. Because there's such a need, and there's a lot
Yeah.
of jobs in renewable energy. So I think we're going to continue to see growth. There's so many infrastructure projects going on. There's a lot of product position right now that are in waste and renewables. So wastewater, waste, garbage, and also energy. So and with the infrastructure fund, that's also all those projects are those are like 5 to 10 year projects. But yes, as Rita mentioned, cyber security, there's definitely I think there's going to be there's a lot of merging going on right now in that space as well. And I think that's going to address some of that talent shortage. Just mush them together. Then there's redundancy, and then there's too many people. But there's definitely a need for job reskilling in many different ways. There's so many healthcare positions, and education. About 5 years ago, we were working on a lot of curriculum development types of products. And then when the pandemic started, we understood that they were they were fortuitous to have done that. But there's such a shortage of teachers that I continue to see more of those types of opportunities as well. But you know, with anything, where's the pain is, where is there a opportunity to solve a problem, and there's where you're going to find the need. So there's a lot of vocational development that I haven't seen any of these programs really start to come to fruition, and that's probably because of the lack of funding. All right, who's going to be motivated to hire all of this, the new world? But because the world is changing, the world of work is changing. People need new skills, and I would expect that our vocational programs are going to be teaching the new world how to use all of these different AI platforms and such as well, right? But the world is digital, and it is now. So everybody needs to have digital skills. It's really, really important.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura, Rita, and Shari, for your answers tonight. Tom, I guess I will hand it back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Albert, and thanks, Laura, Rita, and Shari, for all of your knowledge that you've shared this evening. And this has been very valuable, I'm sure, for all the attendees. That last thought is, I just scribbled a note that perhaps in a year or two, keeping our fingers crossed that there's to be some innovations happening in ed tech or educational technology, coupled with AI that helps to fill that gap that you've so elegantly painted out. I've already seen a few startups in that space that were looking to take educational content and deliver it in multiple formats and kind of ease the whole process of how do you build a textbook and a curriculum and you know, video lessons and all of that together, and try and speed that up using AI. So there's definitely at least a couple of founders that I've spoken with in the last 6 months that are looking into that space to see what can be done. So we can keep our fingers crossed that it'll be easier than spending huge fortunes and time in order to keep up with things. Because I think, as you said, the pace just keeps increasing as we go. But with that, I'd like to again thank you all for your generous sharing of your time and knowledge and talent. And to everyone else who's attended, thank you for your questions and feedback. All of this is highly interesting. We hope to see you at our December event. We're putting the final touches on that. We will be talking about our 2024 plans for SVPMA and looking to get some feedback there. We also potentially have a speaker that will be sharing tips and things that they've done as well in their career. So we will continue the conversation. But again, thank you all so much. We look forward to better things in 2024 and new opportunities for everyone. And we will make better products and make a better world because of it. So thank you all.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Have a good evening.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone, thank you.